Hello, good morning, and welcome to the 2018 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, and welcome to the Bill James Room, presented by the Action Network. My name is Corey Brumbergs, and I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan, and it's my pleasure to introduce the first panel of the conference, Serial Entrepreneurs, Building Winning Businesses in Tech and Sports, with Ted Leonsis and Michael Rubin. Our panel...
Yeah, that's good.
Our panelists today are Ted Leonsis, the chairman of Monumental Sports and Entertainment, and Michael Rubin, the executive chairman of Fanatics. The panel today will be moderated by Jessica Gelman, the CEO of the Kraft Analytics Group and a co-chair of this conference. The panel will last for 40 minutes, and we'll leave 5 minutes at the end for questions. If you do have any questions, please submit them on Twitter using the hashtag #SerialEntrepreneurs. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jess.
Thank you, Corey. All right, we have an incredible lineup here. I couldn't be more thrilled to have the chance to have this conversation. You guys, one of the things in my research to prep for this is that you guys both think differently and brought a new perspective on the media side and on the commerce side. And so for all of the entrepreneurs in the room, going to just start out with what is your view and how do you approach entrepreneurship?
I think connecting the dots, multidiscipline thinking. I started my first business as a student at Georgetown University. I was reading a newspaper. It was the bicentennial. They said 30 million people would be coming into the city. That was data. I said, I got to find something that I can sell them. Snow cones, red, white, and blue snow cones. Introduced variable pricing based on the temperature, 50 cents when it was 80 degrees or less. If it was 90 degrees and above, it went to $1. If it was 100 degrees, we negotiated. So I think just being creative and seeing an opportunity, making sure that you have some data, some numbers around it to support your instinct, and then being really, really frugal with the execution to start. I think when Michael speaks and you talk to me in depth about most of the businesses I've started, you can burn through a lot of money chasing bad ideas, and you don't know if you have the right idea for years and years and years, and you have to keep executing and keep some powder dry for when you find what will scale. That's when you want to be making the investments.
I feel like you legitimately may have created variable pricing. I mean, based on snow cones a few years ago, prices, I like it. You know, for me, I've kind of like, there's different types of entrepreneurs. I barely made it out of high school. I went to college for a few weeks. I'm probably the least educated person in this room by a lot, maybe the least intelligent as well. So, you know, for me, it's always been about, you know, kind of being like a sponge. Like, you know, if you'd say, like, what's the skill set that's kind of helped me to grow, it's been incredible intensity together with learning from others and having lots of smart people around me that I can learn from and grow from. And so, you know, I started with a ski shop in my parents' basement when I was, you know, 11, 12 years old. And by the time I was 14, I opened a ski shop a few miles from my parents' house. And people always said, how'd you do that? And I just was always listening to people around me. So it was a lot of instincts, a lot of, you know, smart people that I could learn from, different than a lot of other people who might have been, you know, incredibly thoughtful up front on, you know, they might have been incredibly, you know, thoughtful up front on, you know, very methodical, you know, long, analytical approach to it. For me, it was really all about instincts and great people around.
No, so it's really interesting because you guys both started very kind of early in your lives being entrepreneurs. I mean, I guess two-part question. Do you think that it is something that is just, you know how to do it? Or have you had success maybe teaching people how to do it? And I think the second part is, what have you learned over time that makes you a better entrepreneur today?
Well, same thing in sports and business. No one knows nothing. And I don't think you can apply cookie cutter learnings across industries and the like. What I've tried to do is I believe that jockeys, Michael, not the horse, sometimes is the big differentiator. You know, you look in social networking, there's lots of players and there's a zero-sum game winner, and they just had better people, better execution. They bet the jockey. And so my belief is I spend a lot of time now with the founders, the entrepreneurs, just to see what they're made of and how will they act when the tree isn't growing straight to heaven, because it never does. And what I have found in my investing career right now with entrepreneurs is that integrity, being able to articulate what the higher calling is for the employees, for the consumer, to rally people. It's not that different than what happens with a good sports team. But no one knows nothing, and this data analytics conference, so we make big investments in the technology and the people, and we beat Cleveland last night on national TV. And John Wall is our best player, he has the ball in his hand all the time. We're 8-2 since he was injured. When he went down, all of the analytics said, we're dead. That he's such an integral part of the team. And it doesn't deal with the human factor, that each of those players said, we will rise to the occasion, and the team's playing a different kind of basketball, and we're being very productive. And so I really now over-index on the people, using the analytics, using the data to inform, but not to make the final decision for us.
Yeah, that's very interesting because it sounds like you're talking a little bit about this mix of gut versus analytics, and I'm kind of interested how you approach. Maybe Michael, you can take this. How you approach. Here's what the data is telling me, and it doesn't feel right. And how do you weigh and measure and actually make the decision?
Well, let me just go back, because the question you originally asked, I think, is a really interesting one, and I may have an answer that people may not like, which is the question of the entrepreneurial spirit. Is that something that you can teach? I don't think it is.
Okay.
So I think it's something that you're either born with or you're not.
Yeah.
And I wasn't born with good athletic abilities, and I wasn't born with good scholastic abilities, but I was born with that entrepreneurial. Spirit, and kind of it was just always like within me. And I've seen, I think if you're an entrepreneur, it's in you, and then how you bring it out and how you apply it can be different. But I think it's absolutely something that you're born with, and it's interesting because I think some people, they want to be entrepreneurs, but you either got that talent or you don't. It's no different than being an athlete. You either got that talent or you don't.
Well, in my time knowing you, what I've kind of seen is you're really a student, and you're always learning and picking up things and applying it. I mean, is that part of the entrepreneurial nature?
I think different entrepreneurs are built differently. For me, I was always a giant risk taker, but I also was always, because I knew, you kind of asked the question of, what do you know that you're good at or not good at? For me, I always knew what I was good at and what I wasn't, and so I've always been a great student of business, not a great student of education necessarily, but a great student of business, and that's for me the way I learned.
So the risk-taking comment that you made is super interesting, and I think that there's lots of different ways to go into business. Ted, would you consider yourself to be a risk taker, and how you have approached your career?
Well, I didn't have any money. I wasn't married. I didn't have a house, so I didn't know what I was risking. All I was risking was reputation and time. And reputation, I think, is something that holds people back, the fear of failing. And one of the great things that we need to internalize is that our country is a startup, and we celebrate failure. And so once you kind of get past that you say, if I try this and it doesn't work, I'll try something else, and I won't be put in a penalty box. I can start another business. I can go to work someplace else. And I think pattern recognition is the key thing for an entrepreneur. I think the first business that I started that was venture capitalized, I bought an Apple II computer in 1980. And I was looking at the computer. I had 2 software packages and a network that was starting to come that was called Ethernet. So I'm looking at this computer, a cathode ray tube, and I said, this looks like a television. And then there's programs here. And then I went grocery shopping and I saw TV Guide, the #1 best-selling magazine in America. And I said, I bet you one day we're going to have the ability to do a guide and a directory about software, about applications. There weren't websites at the time. And I created my first business. I quit my job. I raised $1 million in venture capital and sold it a couple of years later for $60 million. And it was a TV guide for the computer industry for software.
But how did you minimize that risk? Or, I mean, it feels like you maybe didn't think there was risk, but how did you minimize and kind of find the right partners or the right team around you to ensure that you were successful?
Failure wasn't an option. There was honestly not a day that went by that I didn't think we were moving the ball forward. And that when you go into an industry that has old bureaucratic competitors, that's where you want to be, that you can have the confidence that we can do better just because we have a frictionless way to enter the market and to improve every day.
You know, I think on this issue, I couldn't agree more with you, Ted. The bottom line is so many, I hear all the time people say, Michael, I've got this great idea. And so many people have ideas and they're scared to act on those ideas. And if you have the fear of failing, you're dead before you start. For me, I don't have any fear of failing. Maybe in a lot of ways that's dangerous, but that's, I think, what makes great entrepreneurs. So I failed so many times in my life. And to me, every time I've failed, that's led to something bigger and better afterward. And I almost like failing in a kind of demented way. So I think that, you know, one of the key attributes of an entrepreneur is somebody who says, I have no fear of failing. I remember, I'll tell you a story that can relate to what we're talking about. When I reinvented my old company in 1999, we were about a $200 million footwear company in 1999. It was, you know, we were, you know, I aspired to compete with Nike and at that point Reebok and Adidas, which was obviously very unrealistic with my little $200 million footwear company. And we literally overnight changed the company to become the largest provider of e-commerce services to big retailers. I remember I was pitching an investor about it, and the investor, and like I had come up with the idea, and a week later I was pitching an investor, and the investor started screaming at me. The investor's like, what are you doing? This is so irresponsible. You know, you're giving up this $200 million company. How could you start this new business? And by the way, we sold the business, you know, a decade later for $2.5 billion. But at that time, I never even thought, like, before he said that, it never even crossed my mind, like, what risks I was taking, because to me it was so obvious what we were going to do. So I think, you know, when you're a good entrepreneur, or you've got that entrepreneurial spirit, you're not scared to fail. And when you have a vision, you just aggressively go after it.
And you should have a very short memory. I was just thinking, failure, I was part of the biggest business failure in history. AOL was worth $160 billion, was the first company to go public on the web, and we bought Time Warner. And the Sloan School did a case that I had to come up for 3 years and present on what went wrong with the acquisition of AOL and Time Warner. So
Dad, I just like
memories are short.
I want to have your failures. if that's the greatest failure of all time, I like to get in on your failure opportunities.
That was a failure.
Well, well, it's interesting because Ted, you talked about the jockey, and so you said Michael's the jockey here. So that investor doesn't have Ted's eye apparently. But it's actually a great point that you guys both made, and I did actually want to ask specifically about kind of your first bigger companies, GSI and Redgate Communications. So my main question is, what was the reason in your mind why it shouldn't have been successful, and then why was it actually successful?
Well, I was one of the first people to get online. I bought one of the first computers, and then you went to a computer store and you bought a modem. Modems didn't come as part of your computer. And the first time I got online, that 1200 baud, it was like magic. And you just knew that Moore's law and the network effect, things would get faster, better, cheaper, basically till they were free, and that digital was better than analog. So that if you could hitch your wagon early on, first generation, you would be the recipient of all of this R&D, all of this investment. And so I looked at what businesses, what industries could be transformed on the internet. America Online basically was a telecom company, and we turned it into a media e-commerce company. Michael and I spoke on a panel on esports at the NBA All-Star Game, and talking about what a new phenomenon it is and how great it is, and no one really understands it. It was 60 years ago that the CRT was invented, and the app that they used to prove that a CRT was the best interface for a computer was called Tennis for Two. And it was a precursor, 60 years ago, 1958, it was a precursor to Pong. And Pong was social media. It was a computer put in a bar, and one guy would play it, and his friends would watch. Precursor to esports. AOL, its first iteration, like Michael said he was making sneakers, we were a back-end network called Quantum Computer connecting Atari game consoles, because we thought multi-user gaming would be important. Well, all of those steps, and the technology and the bandwidth and the computing power that just came, made for esports today, which I believe will be the biggest business, biggest industry. And 10 years from now, we'll come and it'll be Overwatch, or it'll be League of Legends that are the dominant players, and the NFL and the NBA will be behind them.
So you took a big...
I'm taking the opposite on that one. I think I think they're going to be very important, but we're going to make our first bet. You can come up with a wager in 10 years that Overwatch or another esports league will be bigger than the NFL or the NBA. And I think I'm huge believers in what they're doing, but I'm still taking the under. And you're going to name the stakes.
We can do that.
Okay.
My belief is that first, indoor sport.
How about we take our esports team versus the Wizards and the Capitals?
We could do that.
As a wager.
So
I think it seems fair
Wow.
and equitable.
first, indoor sports are ascendant. Outdoor sports will be challenged. It rains, there's heat, there's humidity. You can't get cameras working. The wireless fidelity and connectivity isn't great. You can control that environment in a building. That's why I keep doubling down. I bought 2 arena football league teams. I own half the league.
Ted,
How do you do when you
team.
play yourself?
What's that?
When you play yourself, who do you root
No,
for?
it's my son. He's the
I
great
think
player.
you've gotten a little soft, Ted, living down in D.C. We need to get you back up to Boston.
Secondly, the sports, for
I
the
agree.
most part, were made for television. Football was made for television. The camera angle, the seats that you want are at the 50-yard line, because that's the optical memory that's been grooved. You go to a young person and say, what do you like? Well, they play video games, and they're in the game. The seats that they want, so arena football, my highest priced tickets, what we've learned, are standing room only in the end zone, because that's the view that the kids have. The bundle will be redefined. The bundle right now is breaking. Is it that people aren't coming in to fill in the churn? I think it really is. How many people are obsessive about the Olympics this week?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's hockey.
you're not. You're
Less,
just not.
for sure.
And my belief is that if you don't reinvent for the new medium, many times in e-commerce we talk about make it mobile first. We have to make all of our products now global first. There's 7 billion people on the planet. There's 4 billion people connected to the internet. We have 300 million connections. There's 180 million people that actually pay for some kind of internet service. When we started AOL and WorldCom was right next to us, we had 80% of the world's internet traffic flowing through Northern Virginia. Now we don't really matter. We're very, very small. And so esports started as a global phenomenon, working its way here. Gaming and gambling, it's accepted in Europe. It's working its way here. And so we're going to see data, we're going to see technology, we'll see the convergence of some kind of metricing, and it'll make all of our sports look like they're digital games. And I believe that young entrepreneurs, that's who we should be promoting in our organization, because they didn't grow up watching television, they grew up playing video games.
So I think one thing that's really interesting about both of your backgrounds is that you obviously sold your companies. I think first question, so a two-part question. I'm going to start with you, Michael. When did you know it was the right time to sell? And one of the interesting dichotomies is that you then didn't stay with the company, but circled back and bought some assets of it. And Ted, you actually obviously went and worked with AOL and led the company for many years. So when did you know it was right, and how did you know that you shouldn't continue on with that company, that you need to do something else?
Sure. So first, I don't ever think about, like when you're building a company, I think if you ever think about like, here's who I'm going to sell it to, or here's like what's going to happen with it, I think you build a bad company. So for me, I always built our company for the long term. Everything we thought about was what was going to make the company incredible over the next several decades. And I think if you do that and you have a really long-term perspective in mind, then you have the choice of good opportunities that will come to you. So we, I made a lot of mistakes at my old company, and one of the biggest mistakes that we made was, the original company, GSI Commerce, that eBay bought for $2.5 billion, was the largest provider of e-commerce and marketing services for big retailers. What I screwed up with the company was we did too many things not well enough because I never loved our core business, and every time we got in a new business, we did the existing businesses less well. So by the time eBay approached us, and they approached us for all of the right reasons, saying they want to get all these big retailers, whether it was Ralph Lauren or Toys R Us or GNC, they want to have these big companies in their marketplace to be better competitive with Amazon. It seemed like, to me, strategically, a great outcome for them. And for me, I had recognized that I had made mistakes with the business, that we had too many businesses that were too diversified. So at the same time, they said to me, look, we really want this B2B business, but what do we do with this consumer thing? And that's when I knew, for me, I want to focus on Fanatics and what a massive opportunity that was. So it was kind of like a combination of being approached as we were building the business, and then seeing that they wanted the business that I was least interested in, and they wanted to sell me the business that I was most interested in. What was really interesting is, I think, when you build a big company and then you sell it, you get to look at yourself and say, what I get right and what I get wrong. And when I restarted, kind of with the three companies we bought and really primarily focused on Fanatics, we immediately had a vision to transform the industry and the business, because the industry was like this really sleepy business industry that hadn't changed for decades. And it worked the same way for the previous, since the invention of sports, people were making licensed sports merchandise. The leagues, gave rights to a manufacturer, who then sold that merchandise to a retailer, who then sold it to the consumer. And in the modern times of the internet, the background that I grew up in the previous 15 years, the opportunity to work with the leagues and teams to build a massive direct-to-consumer business was dead strategically in lockstep with what they were doing with their overall leagues and trying to build their direct-to-consumer businesses. So for me, it was being in the right place at the right time and getting a little bit of luck and timing go your way as well.
It's super interesting that you were able to buy those assets back. And I think, Ted, in your case, you then, what was that discussion like? Okay, we're going to buy your company, and then you're going to basically come in and run the company that is acquiring you.
The Meridian Hotel here, I met Steve Case. AOL had 250 people. My little company had 150 people. And they poured coffee and said, it's nice to meet you, Steve. I'm a member of AOL. I use the service. And he said, I've heard great things about you, and we ought to merge our companies. And I said, can we kiss first? Can I like meet your parents? You want to merge the companies? And he said, yeah, this is about IP and talent, and we have great first mover advantage. We probably have 50% of the world's talent in what will be the biggest new industry. And we have to get access to capital. If we can go public, then you'll be able to have a tradable stock, you'll create wealth for employees, you'll get return for your investors, but you'll be able to acquire other companies. And you look at Facebook, and Instagram's doing pretty good.
Sure.
You have to use acquisitions if you're going to do something at scale. Michael was at eBay. Well, PayPal was something that they ended up acquiring. Now they've spun it out, construction and deconstruction. But my belief is if you're doing something at scale, having that currency is really, really important.
I agree 100%. If you look at our business today, we are primarily an organic growth company, where we're always acquiring things to help us achieve our vision more quickly. So best example with that would be as we're changing the whole model from what was originally selling other people's merchandise to today, we're becoming kind of what I'd say is the largest e-commerce or vertical commerce company out there. And we design, manufacture, and sell directly to the consumer most of the products that we make. We need to get capabilities more quickly to do that. So we went out last year and bought Majestic, who is the official outfitter of baseball, and had these vertical capabilities to plug that engine into our company. So it's a great example of, I think, and we bought a bunch of companies at my old company as well, and some worked well and some didn't. But if you've got a bold vision, you can't always organically build everything yourself. And I definitely think M&A plays a role in that and helps you to achieve your vision more quickly.
And then it gives you the opportunity to buy sports teams. Everyone who's bought a sports team, for the most part, had great success in another business, another industry. And then they brought that point of view, those gifts, to the most private of businesses, where we're not public companies, although I say we're the most public of companies. Everything that we do is magnified. The social responsibility of owning a team is off the chart, which we see more and more because of the centrality, the role that we play in our community. We're big employers. We hold the emotions and the memories of our fan base in our hands. We own buildings. These buildings become iconic in the community. They become identifiable. I'm in Boston. All people talk about the Patriots and the Celtics, and it's Red Sox. It's just lifeblood. So we have to innovate, though, because these assets, in some cases, are 100 years old. The NHL's 100 years old. We're considered a new team. We're 42 years old. And so what I tried to do was say, what worked on the internet? How is software becoming more and more important? And to say, we're not about sports teams. This is an integrated SaaS business. And we want to be like that because SaaS businesses are valued much higher than sports teams. Sports teams usually have been trading 4 or 5 times revenue. SaaS businesses can be 8 to 12 times revenue. And what does a SaaS business have that analysts, that investors value so highly? Reoccurring growing revenues. You go, well, we got a 20-year TV deal. We have a 15-year local deal with escalators of 3 or 4%. We have 10-year, 20-year naming rights deals. Our suites are sold for 5 years. Geez, more than 80% of our revenues are in contracts. The only thing that we have are season tickets. We renew our season tickets 90, 95%. So we look, and once you start thinking and acting like a different business, and people said, you bought a hockey team. Well, we paid $85 million for a hockey team. Now we have an enterprise that's probably worth over $3 billion. We looked at the business differently. We own media networks. We stream. We're going to be leaders in esports. We'll be leaders in gaming and gambling. And we're using this iconic an asset with longevity and reinventing it to make it look like a very, very relevant next generation kind of media and commerce company.
No, I mean, obviously what you guys have been doing is groundbreaking. I think the OTT network that you've built is very special. And I think like one of the things, I mean, you're obviously applying so much that you have done from your prior experiences to help it transform the sports industry. Same for you, Michael, in my opinion. I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you're helping with the Sixers. But I think just generally, is there anything that has been surprising out sports that you're like, oh, I wish I'd known that previously?
Well, I'm fortunate. I've never tried to fool anybody in that I would know what I was doing with a player. I didn't play professional sports, and so I never touched the third rail of trading players or signing free agents. I tried to make sure that we had the infrastructure and the right people to do that. I think one of the things that has surprised me is because you're a league, right? And I've become friends with a lot of owners. Michael and I are good friends. Dan Gilbert and I are really good friends. We co-invest in lots of deals. Shinola, I'm chairman of Shinola. It's in Detroit. We helped to bring Detroit back. Dan's a big investor. We played them in Cleveland last night. I wanted to kill them. Right? So I mean, it's this very, very unique keiretsu. But for the most part, the leagues want to keep things the way they are.
Yeah.
And the world has changed so dramatically. So I was chairman of the NBA Media Committee, and we got a great, great deal, and we've all celebrated. But I've said, you know, the party will end in 10 years. We need now to be making the big investments to find what is the next big pot of money. And then I look and I say, well, the big pot of money is based around data and analytics. And it's like Wall Street. We're a big investor, along with the Crafts, in DraftKings. DraftKings is one of the most sophisticated product marketing data analytics company imaginable.
For sure.
We're big investors in a company called Sportradar. Sportradar really has been pioneers in integrity assurance and in making multiple kinds of bets around a service. I was friends with the people at Disney. I said, ESPN2, ESPN3, turn one into CNBC. Give legitimacy to the data. Have buy-side and sell-side analysts.
Yeah.
It's not gambling. No one goes on to CNBC, which is on in that vertical 8 hours a day. Right? If we were sports, we're fighting for time. CNBC and that vertical's on all of the time. And so what I think we have to do now as a league, as leagues, is to say, what's the next pot of money? How do we entrepreneurially organize ourselves, leagues, teams, players, unions, to find that replacement set of dollars? And I think that will be in-game, in-arena gaming and gambling in the light of day, totally transparent. And as I've said on a lot of times, what are we afraid of? Who are we competing with? Like Tony Soprano. And the states will embrace this. I think there's going to be a sea change in the next 12 months on how we look at this, and entrepreneurs, the environment to go after this opportunity will be enormous, and there's probably someone in this room who thought they were getting their MBA, and they'll end up loving sports, and they'll create the next clearinghouse, they'll create a betting line company, they'll do something next generation that helps the leagues and the teams to get at those dollars.
Ted, before I chime in here, I first want to say that I think you gave ESPN and Turner a great deal, and they got a great deal, not the NBA
That's
got
true.
a great deal. So we need to clarify that to start with. You know, I think when I look at the whole sports industry, one of the things that I'm most excited about is how much opportunity there is for entrepreneurialism. Like, I look at our business, and we created a business really in the last, 5 years that's changed, and it will continue to change how we service sports fans in a pretty big way. And I think we'll create tens of billions of dollars of value. And I think the great thing about the sports industry is every decade there's several 11-figure ideas of businesses that you can create. So whether it's gambling that's going to be the next big opportunity, which I believe that it will be, or something that we haven't even thought about today, I think the sports industry consistently creates massive opportunities for a change and disruption. What I do agree with you 100% is the way we consume media has already drastically changed, and in 10 years will look completely different than it looks today. But that's a massive opportunity for entrepreneurialism in sports, and for people in this room to figure out, how do you take advantage of that? How do you help be a disruptor and change the industry? And I think there's never been more opportunity than there is within the sports industry to be an entrepreneurial and be a disruptor.
Well, I think, Michael, one of the things that's so fascinating about what you've done is you've obviously created this whole sports licensing, e-commerce, now v-commerce, and you've partnered with leagues now who have invested in your business. And what's kind of in your view, why does that make sense for you?
For me, I'm a huge believer in aligning everybody around your vision. And the one thing I've learned, when you're little, a lot of people try to help you to get bigger. When you're bigger, people try to make you little again. It's just the way it works.
It's like winning a championship.
Why does everybody outside New England hate the Patriots?
Exactly.
Because you win all the time, okay? And it's when we were a little $250 million company, everybody wanted to help us. And now as we get bigger, everybody doesn't want to help us anymore. So from my perspective, if you have an opportunity to have all of your partners as your strategic investors and owners in the company, it really helps to align ourselves. So Ted is, we're partners in Fanatics together through his NHL ownership, and the NFL is partners with us through their ownership in Fanatics. And I think that really helps to create better behavior as you're trying to change an industry. And fundamentally, we're taking an industry that, to be honest, was very stale from a merchandise perspective, and we're trying to better service the fan, make the teams and owners a lot more money, which is important because people spend billions of dollars for these franchises. They want to get a return on their investment, and we want to do it in a really collaborative way. So those partnerships have been very good for everybody.
What are the specific challenges? I mean, you guys are digital. What are the specific challenges you are facing and seeing with actually reaching millennials?
The challenge. Well, certainly it's funny. We were talking about esports before, and I'm going to win the bet against Ted, and I'm going to own the Wizards and the Capitals as part of our bet. Versus you can have Dignitas if I'm wrong. It seemed like
You're just not executing well there, Michael.
Yeah. For me, I think I've done a 180 on esports in the past year or two. We had every big esports property owner, important person call us and say, hey, we want you to do in esports what you've done in the traditional licensed sports merchandise. And for the first, 100 times people asked me, we said, we're laser focused. We don't want anything to interrupt that. And I think what we realized was we looked at the data from our fans. And if you look at what they were buying, there was no support to do anything in esports because we didn't sell any esports merchandise. So of course there'd be no data to substantiate it. Then you look at time spent, and we looked at our buyers, and they were spending massive time consuming esports from a time spent, with what they were doing. So it really changed our perspective. And now we look at this as, it could be kind of the next billion-dollar category within Fanatics, and we're very excited about it. So I think when you talk about connecting with that consumer, I think watching not where they spend, but what they do drives a lot of decision-making for us.
So pretty soon in League of Legends, we're going to see them wearing Fanatics gear?
I think throughout esports, you'll see a lot of Fanatics merchandise. And today, here's the interesting thing. There's no merchandise business today. I mean, your Patriots retail business is as big as all of esports merchandise business today, which is scary when you think about that, but that's the opportunity.
Hey, Michael, so I personally own the building in DC. The city didn't build it, we own it. 3 million people go into the building. We have multiple professional sports teams. It used to be called Verizon Center, and we just redid the deal with Capital One, unbelievable partner. And we have a house where we have our players for the esports. And we play on multiple platforms, but it's an apartment building. And we just sold the naming rights for the home. And the building got $10 million, and the home got $4.5 million. Someone paid us $4.5 million, and they're very good marketers because they understand that these young players are rock stars around the world. And the business model is so different, and we can learn so much in all our industries and also in sports. So we won. Team Liquid is the team that Peter Guber and I and Jeff Vinnick own and operate. And we won the most, most prize money last year. We won a tournament that raised $25 million to give to the players, and we finished in first place. I think we won $13 million. By the way, we need a CBA because the players got 95% of the prize money. Now, why didn't we squawk about that? The money was raised through crowdsourcing. I mean, just imagine that the passion is so deep. There's so many people, 160 million people that play League of Legends, and they said, when you buy a ticket, or you buy a skin, or you buy something, donate some extra money so we can have big prizes to pay the players. Well, that's a radical change. We have deep passion. Let's get our fans to do things. They give away their product, and then they break the product, and then they sell you and train you on how to play the game better. Training is an unbelievably big business in esports. There's something called the meta. The meta is so exciting. You show up one day, you turn on your computer, and the gun that you were using, the laser that you were activating, the rocket ship that you've been driving, it's changed overnight. So now you have to learn what to do, but you can buy those tools to get advantage again. It would be like if last night the Wizards went to Cleveland and the basket was 12.5 feet. I mean, what would happen to the game? What would happen to the dynamics? Would your great three-point shooter now be rendered ineffective because he never shot at a 12.5-foot basket? And so I think young people, college, high school, if you can stay connected to them, you'll just learn. Social media happened on a campus. I think you'll see that the kinds of things in OTT. I brought my son to Penn. He had an Xbox. They were wired with cable. We moved them in. I went out and bought him a television. He was big man on campus, playing video games, watching television, watching our games on Slingbox. 4 years later, my daughter went to Georgetown. So we'll get you a big TV too. Dad, I don't want a TV. They don't have cable. It's wireless. Get me an iPad. There's a 4-year difference.
Yep.
My son graduates. He moves into DC. First thing he does, he calls the cable company. He installs the cable. He has that same TV. He's known. People know who he is. He's registered. He pays a monthly fee. My daughter moves to London. Furnished apartment. Never turned on the TV. The media company doesn't know she's there. The newspaper company doesn't know she's there. This is the existential question that we will have in sports. If young people who love sports aren't signing up for cable, and you're in a sold-out situation in your building, and the only way you can get access to tickets is the aftermarket, and ticket prices are ridiculously high, how do we get the next generation of fan to fall in love with our players, with our brand, and our products? And so we said, let's do what my daughter was doing. Let's create an OTT, mobile first, and redefine the bundle. And one of the things that I have found is that conventional wisdom just gets ingrained into everyone and how they think. Cable's deep in trouble. It's $1,000 for the triple play, data, video, and video, data, and telephony. $1,000. I have seats that cost $2,500. Pretty much all of downstairs is $750 to $1,000. And I see our fans show up 10 minutes into the first quarter, they leave early. So I said, we have more value in one game than the cable companies have with all of their bundle for the year. So maybe what we should be doing is we should bundle cable to our season ticket holders. We should redefine our bundle and the service that we are giving to our customers, and we should really look at and have permission on, well, what else in outside media and technology and services. We should be creating, if you will, our own versions of Amazon Prime in market.
I think what you're talking about is right on and perfect. And I think we're going to have one question from the audience. Michael, I'm going to direct it to you. Do you have an example of when your team stopped believing in the vision, and can you talk about how you brought them back?
From when we started my old company in 1999 until eBay bought it in 2001, we had a few near-death experiences. We went through the internet bust in 2001. We went through the financial crisis in 2008. And from my perspective, the good days are really easy. That's like easy to navigate through. What really proves, I think a good leader, what proves a good company is how do you deal with the difficult times. And I think, to be honest, I think during the toughest times, I think we always had people very aligned to what our vision was, how we would navigate through it, how to make a better company as a result of it. And I think we actually prospered the most during the difficult times. So if you look at 2008, when retail just stopped, it decelerated by 15 or 20%. We said, hey, we're going to tighten the belt, we're going to run the business better. And our best year was probably 2010. We got bought in spring of 2011. Yeah. So I think, great companies and, great leaders during difficult times figure out how to really take advantage of those opportunities. I think you get tested all the time. And, I think that, we generally try to figure out how to navigate through those times. And I think no different for your organization, the Patriots. You guys, this incredibly admired organization, but you get tested a lot with controversy, and that goes, it's the same.
Not me personally.
Right, but the organization does, and we do, and any business does, and Ted's been. And I think you see, the interesting thing to do is to evaluate how do you navigate through those difficult times. Yeah. And to me, that's the test of, great leadership and great entrepreneurs.
Well, thank you guys. This was a great conversation. Let's give them a round of applause.